Get Pucked. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. Matt, Dave, Vito, and Greg here with you today. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Great.
All right, four greats. Perfect. Well, boys, I got a couple things I want to talk about, so we're going to jump right into it. And the number one thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about today actually has something to do with what we've been doing from the podcast account on X or Twitter. If you haven't already, we strongly encourage you to go take a look on Twitter or X. We've been having an ongoing poll, and we've been systematically plugging in based on your guys' feedback, you, the listeners, going there and letting us know who you think is going to be playing what position when the season starts. And the one thing that struck me as not necessarily peculiar, but as something I felt noteworthy, most of the positions seem to be pretty self-explanatory, not really any too many shocks. However, we do have the most recent plug-in of Lane Hutson, seemingly at a very overwhelming percentage. I want to say something in and around 75%. Put him as the second pairing defenseman.
LB.
And what was that?
Left-hand defenseman.
On the left, yeah. And I'm just curious about your take on that. I mean, that's a very, very big percentage of people that think that this is what they suspect is going to happen. And I know we talked about the past about how, given what they were playing last year and the positions that are up for grabs, and, it's very likely that he was going to possibly start AHL. What do you guys think about that? And of course, after the prospect showcase that just happened, what do you think? Are you in agreement with the vast majority of people who think this is something that's going to happen? Or do you think people are kind of living on the Lane hype train a little too much and he's not really going to start the season in Montreal?
What do you want that
first? Go ahead.
Well, I think, in some cases, I would say it's recency bias. But like in this case, I must agree myself that I think it makes some sense, especially if you think that, the three of the top four defensemen are likely going to be Matheson, Goulet, and Savard. And,
sure. Yep.
If it's kind of expected that the first pairing is Matheson and Goulet, whether, people in here like it or not. I think it's very, very realistic that that's going to be the first pairing. And so that leaves Savard in the second pair. And I think, out of the possibilities, I just think it's a very good match to get Lane on Savard, in Savard's pairing. I think it would be probably the best player to play him with at this moment. And I'm not saying long term, but I just don't think, a guy like Struble or whoever you want to plug in that top four makes more sense in right now. Well, it still depends on Cam, but I think right now I might be biased myself with how he's looked over the last two games. But I think right now I'd be comfortable trying it, and especially with how he looked against Detroit in the last few games of the last season. So I think for me, I don't really have a problem with it. And I voted for Hutson myself to be on that.
Nice. All right. Very good.
Voting on the polls.
Well, I expected all of you to have voted, by the way, but we'll get into that another time. Dave, what's your take?
I don't want to be like a wet blanket or anything, but I think I can use some work in the AHL. I think that unless he has an amazing camp, I think that he'll probably start the season in the AHL, or barring injury or anything. I think Struble would be a nice fit there. In all honesty, I think you have that locked in, and I think you're probably gonna have, Arbor, Xhekaj, and Mailloux probably as your third pairing, and the top three, like Greg said, that's pretty much locked in, and I think that's the way I kind of see it right now. Obviously, there's a whole training camp, there's a whole exhibition season to change my mind. But for me, I think there's, you can work on his skating a little bit. I think there's some things. I think he'll benefit from going and playing a little couple of games in the AHL and seeing how he does there, as opposed to starting in. People are excited about Lane Hutson, and I don't think it would be the wrong move to start him. I think that it would get the hype train going. As you said, I think a lot of people are excited to see him play. I just think I'm always more cautious than not when it comes to young defensemen. I think we've seen it far too many times. These stud defensemen come in, and we've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast of people coming up and being rushed in at 18, 19, 20 years old and with no experience and just thrown into the fire. And they usually never pan out for long-term careers. I think he could benefit a little bit from a beginning the season in the AHL and seeing where it goes from there. That's just my honest opinion as of right now.
I want only your honest opinion, Dave.
I'm open to being talked out of it. I'm also open to change. Obviously, there's a lot of variables and a lot of things, and that's the beauty of this team is that it's wide open almost. So he could prove me wrong, but for now, I would start him in the AHL.
All right, you're not taking a hardliner stance that no, he can't possibly. You're open to changing your mind, and that's fine. I am curious, however, just before I go to Vito's take. You mentioned like concern about Rush, but I heard you essentially say you have Mailloux as the sixth defenseman, who is also very young and would technically be a rookie. And I didn't see you really have the same sort of, I don't know, trepidation about him being there.
He did have a year in Laval.
Yeah, exactly. He had a year in Laval.
Fine. Okay. That makes the difference then?
It does.
I'm just asking. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm just curious.
It's 1 year of pro hockey and playing against guys who are pros, right? And also it's a little bit different because I think his role will be a little bit different than what people are expecting from Lane Hutson. And throwing him into the fire on that second line, then there'll be pressure to put him on the power play. And what happens? Like Lane Hutson's game, I'm going to tell you right now, is going to depend a lot on his offensive numbers for what people are going to be wowed by. I think.
Well, for sure. Yeah.
So that's a lot of pressure on a kid. I don't think a lot of people are going to be worrying about Logan Mailloux's offensive numbers, although that will come into play for sure, but not as much. Lane Hutson, his pure value right now and stuff will obviously be getting those offensive numbers, and that's a lot to ask of a young kid right off the bat to start his career. So that's why I think the situations are a little bit different. And as Vito said, the main point is he's had a 1 year of pro. I think that makes a huge difference.
Fair enough. Vito.
You start this guy right away in the NHL. At the very least, you're giving him those 10 games to start, and you start him. When was the last time the Montreal Canadiens had a quarterback like this, or a potential quarterback? His name was Andrei Markov. Now they have somebody who has fantastic edge work. If you look at the way he skates and his mobility is insane. Yes, there's some defensive questions, but to Greg's point, pair him with somebody like David Savard, who's going to calm the game down, has the maturity, is a veteran. You're pairing him with the right guy to kind of like show him the ropes at least till trade deadline. It's just the only thing I'm not too crazy about is the fact that Montreal still has too many left-handed defensemen, and they're gonna have to move one at some point. They already made space by moving Harris and getting Laney and all that, but there's still too many with Struble there, Jacky, Gooley, Matheson, Lane Hutson. That's 5 just there alone that are all left-handed defensemen, and we're putting Gooley on his offhand. So, but how do you not start this guy? To what Greg mentioned, and he took the words out of my mouth. He hasn't had a bad game yet or a bad showing. I mean, he played well against Detroit. Okay, albeit it's been the prospects camp, and he's done very well there. But he's controlled the games while he was there. He dominated. He was the person that stood out the most outside of Thorpe and Reinbacher's very stable, quiet games, but he played very stable, and Mailloux as well. So it's like he's doing everything he needs to do to prove himself, to say, hey, I deserve a spot on this roster. Now, there's still training camp with all the main players there. We'll see how he goes and what he does. But he brings in a certain aspect and a certain element that the Montreal Canadiens don't have. And he is a wow factor. You can see there's going to be some moments where you might question his defense a bit. There's going to be some moments where there's going to be some growing pains. It's normal. We're still in a rebuilding year, so to speak. They do want to take the next step. They made it perfectly clear during the golf event and all that they want to take the next step and be in the hunt for a playoff spot. But at the same time, you're looking at it and saying, we want to make it entertaining hockey, and Lane Hutson is part of this equation for the long term, so might as well get him going now. What's the difference if you go to get sent down to the AHL and they start beating the crap out of him and start hurting him, and just the goons that are there are going to try to take his head off? At the NHL level, I think he's better suited with somebody like David Savard right now.
I gotta echo the sentiment. I mean, my take, to make it quick, is I also think it's his to lose. To Dave's point, anything can happen. If you got a bunch of other guys that shine, and for whatever reason he takes, I can't understand why he would, but if somehow he takes a step back and it's just not a good showing, yeah, you start him in the AHL, no problem. And that's why I kind of look at this as like a win regardless. I don't necessarily see there being a wrong move. My stance is more, I think you get more out of Lane when he's playing with better players. You're going to actually see him develop and be better, and it's going to be better for him and his confidence because he'll be with guys that are playing on a level that he's already at. He might not have the maturity, and I don't mean he's immature, but just in the sense whatever, he's 19 years old, right? He's a kid still, essentially. He might not be there worldly, but I think intellectually in the game of hockey, he's there. He's well past AHL level. And I think you'll see him play better amongst peers like that. And it would be better for him developmentally, which is just my personal take. I don't think his game translates to the AHL as well as it would do in the NHL, which is why I think a Mayu and even a Reinbacher, for example, can go cut their nose in the AHL a bit. And it's not too bad. It's probably good for them. They're big boys, big bodies. That's the kind of hockey they play.
We gotta stop putting Mayu in there because Mayu is a right-handed shot, and Montreal lacks right-handed shot defensemen. So I think he has that.
It helps him move up a bit. I'll grant you that, but I mean the right-hand, left-hand thing I think is irrelevant. If you're ready to go, you're ready to go.
I get it, 100%. You're right, but the fact that Montreal is weak on right-hand, and when you look at who's going to be playing on the right-hand side, you have Goulet on the from what we've said and everything that it looks like the way the projected lineups are going to be. He's playing his offhand, then it becomes Savard, and then it's one of Barron, Mayu, and it ain't going to be Reinbacher. I don't think so anyways.
Well, probably not, but it could be. You never know.
What I could also see is that they maybe do put Lane Hutson down to Laval as a possibility if they feel that, they don't want to lose a player to waivers. He's waivers exempt, so they could say, hey, temporarily while we're trying to make some space and whatnot or try to make another move, just go play and get your minutes in, and we'll call you up once we make the necessary roster moves to fit you in. That's a possibility too. That's an angle that we have to consider as well, because I don't think they're not going to want to lose Barron to waivers. Struble technically could be sent down as well, but his game is a little bit more mature. Doesn't bring the exact same things as Lane Hutson does, and Montreal needs more Lane Hutson than Struble, especially with Jack-Eye there. But it's something that they might have to consider at some point. They're going to give him the 10 games, though, in my opinion, for sure.
Okay, I can see that. And I mean, something to kind of segue to, you mentioned about him coming up and being a quarterback on the power play, and we haven't had one since Markov and stuff. And there has been some updates in regards to the handling of the power play for the Canadiens in the upcoming season. We know Alex Burrows stepped away. He's no longer going to be responsible for that. Whether he was the whipping boy or he legitimately was a guy who just couldn't come up with a good power play, I leave that up for the fans to decide, but fact remains he's gone. And the big burning question was, who's going to take over that responsibility? Is it going to be somebody from the outside they bring in who's a specialist? Is it going to be a task that's going to be assigned to one of the other assistants? Or does Martin St. Louis himself take the mantle and do it? So it turns out from the man himself, Coach Martin St. Louis said at the golf tournament that Vito alluded to a little bit ago, he's going to do it. The head coach is going to handle the responsibility himself. Greg, is this a wise decision? Once you're done, your hair good? Good? All right. Once this is in play, and now that St. Louis says it's going to be him, does this change anything? Was it truly all on Burrows and Martin St. Louis just didn't have any input over the last year and a bit, and now he is? Or is it going to be all brand new and we're going to see a new kind of format? There won't be the dump and chase. What do you think? Is this good, or should they have done something different?
Well, I think the answer is really going to be much clearer once we actually see the results. It's tough to know.
Oh my God! No. Tell me what you really think. Don't tell me what the results are going to be. Is it a good idea now? He's saying what the results are going to be. Of course, we're going to know once the results. What do you think now today?
It's very hard to evaluate because we don't know what was coming from Burrows and what was coming from the other, like St. Louis, what he was advising or whatever. So it's hard to criticize solely Burrows for the struggles on the power play. And so that's just why it's difficult to know what to expect from St. Louis taking over, because we don't know, from our perspective, what Burrows was asking for, or what St. Louis, what was his contribution already. But I think it can only get better. So
I think I say that every year. So I mean,
yeah, I
It
think
can't get any worse.
I don't know. Guys, honestly, I saw somebody else talking about this. I full-heartedly agree. If you look at the power play of the last year and look at the caliber of the player Martin St. Louis is and how he played hockey, did you detect any bit of Martin St. Louis in any of the power play?
Okay. This is how you can tell whose power play is whose when we see the first game and we get the first power play. If that drop pass happens, then it was Marty St. Louis the entire time. If that drop pass doesn't happen, then Alex Burrows, thank you for 4 years of that stupid drop pass. I don't want to ever see it again. I don't want to ever see it again as the main driver to try to get into the offensive zone.
That's
Like,
just one
it could be
component.
one
What
of the
about
tools they
who was
use.
on the ice? Power play unit 1 and 2.
They
Who has
shoved
control
left,
over
right,
that?
and center. Oh yeah, the matchups and the lines.
I mean, anyways, let's not jump out of turn. We'll get to you in a moment, Dave.
no, I mean, Vito can answer all he wants. I mean, look, at the end of the day,
I
I
got a
think
good
the
rotation happening. Go
the
ahead.
best part of this move basically is we're actually going to see Marty St. Louis control something fully, take responsibility for it. Because again, Martin St. Louis, a lot of question marks around him, in my opinion, and how he's going to fare when the chips are down and it's time to do well. I think he's going to handle himself perfectly on this power play. I think this is a good move, in my opinion. At the end of the day, it's Marty St. Louis assuming responsibility for what is happening going forward. He has no one to fall back on, no one to blame, and it could only spell good things. I mean, Marty St. Louis seems to be a creative mind, seems to be the perfect type to handle a power play. In all honesty, if I were to pick somebody, it would have been Marty St. Louis. So I'm happy to see it. I think you're going to see a significant change. Although, as I told Greg, I think I've said that every time there's a slight change in the power, it's like, it's got to improve now. But at the end of the day, I really do think it's a great thing, and it's going to be a very good insight into what type of coach Marty St. Louis is going to be, because it's going to be the first thing that finally, I mean, like now he's on the hook for the power play. Right now, you could point to him, and if something doesn't work, you say it's Marty. He has expectations linked to what he's doing, as opposed to the past few years where he's just been able to hour in a rebuild. Doesn't really matter the results. Now the results matter, so we're going to see it.
They did bring a consultant and a coaching consultant. I wonder if that person's going to help with the power play as well. He's not going to be behind the bench, but
no.
I wonder if
the guy from the
Very
U.S.
possibly.
national program, the developmental program.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
So,
He's a bit of a mystery. We know he has a connection to Martin St. Louis, but what his exact role is, like, he's not on the bench, I don't believe.
No, he's not. He's not.
Yeah. So
Roger Grillo is his name.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So I don't know if he's like the coach whisperer or something. Like he's just there to kind of coach the coaches and help them out or catch things that they're doing. Like, I don't exactly know what his purpose is, but by all accounts, this is a good thing.
I think it's gonna be more like a bird's eye view.
Mhm.
You know, like a few years ago, I forgot what his name was, but they had somebody that was kind of overlooking the game from the top during the games, and they had the earpiece and they would all communicate with one another, and then during the intermission they'd go through some tape. But I mean, I think maybe that's going to be that person's role, but again, I'm not too sure.
And for the power play question with St. Louis, what's your take on that?
Well, Dave and Greg both said, but I said it like I was saying before. We're going to find out for sure who was really running the power play. But to your point, the lines, I would think I think the lines have always been Marty St. Louis, and they worked with the personnel that they had. Now they've got an additional weapon with Laney being there. So it really, they've got a threat on basically both power play lines, and it's going to be a question of how they're going to shuffle it. It's just going to be more about strategy and how everyone's going to adapt to it. I'm saying the very first game and first power play, I think it's going to take a bit more time before they figure out what their power play strategy is going to be. But I think they're going to really, really use the two cannons and two shots that they have in Caulfield and Caulfield, Laney, and actually, you know what? Add a third one, add Slavkovsky, because if you've been seeing some of his shots, his release has gotten a little quicker from what we saw, and his shot, there's definitely power there. So there's definitely threats on those two lines. It's going to be putting it all together, but now it's time. They're at the point where Marty St. Louis is the coach. He doesn't have the leniency he had before. This is him. This is his show, and the story. The power play before we could have always pointed if the power play was doing bad, it was is it Alex Burrows? It's Alex Burrows. He's been there for so long, they're doing the same thing over and over again. Now it's Marty St. Louis. He's the head coach and he's the power play guy. So he's taking on two big responsibilities.
I'm gonna maybe just to the same sentiment, but take it a step further and be just a little bit more direct about it. I think this is phenomenal news. With all due respect to Alex Burrows, I'm going to assume that was his job and he was responsible for it. I'm sure he was open to suggestions, and the other coaches were there to help, but that was his job, and it wasn't working. And I think now that that's gone and Martin St. Louis is going to be the one responsible and it's going to be his brainchild that you're going to see out there with the extra man, I think you're going to see a very, very different power play. Granted, you do have the extra, like you're mentioning with Laney, and you get an extra threat. I just think it's going to be a different look. And that's probably the most important thing. Even if they ran it back with the same guys they had last year, I imagine they would be far more successful this year than they were last year, given the fact that Martin St. Louis is going to be the one devising up these different plays and the way they're going to handle it. And who knows? They might throw in the puck back nonsense, maybe, but maybe there'll be a different way that they handle it. Something that was just missing, because there was something missing. And I think this is phenomenal. I'm actually quite happy they didn't get another guy to do it.
Yeah, I always found it crazy that Alex Burrows was the guy in control of the power play, when if you looked at his career, he was never really a great power play guy at the beginning.
It's very different. Coaching and playing.
I get it.
As you tell, it's a completely different animal. That's why you never see really superstars excelling at coaching and vice versa. It's always these middle of the pack guys who end up being great coaches. It's just it's a character thing more so than a skill thing. I think, and I know the power play does involve skill, but it's how you see the game. And just because you're not necessarily talented enough to be a top power play performer, maybe you're not a good skater, you don't have a good enough shot, doesn't mean you don't have the hockey mind to know how to run a power play. You know what I mean? So I think it could have worked, but I mean it didn't. So.
It didn't, and it went too long.
Yeah, no, it was problematic, and I'm very optimistic about this. I think we're in really good hands with a guy of his caliber and his hockey mind, the way he sees it, and the way he understands his guys. I think this is going to be great. However, not everybody feels this way, not necessarily about the Canadiens, but about the team in general. While we're all sitting here, and I think we're all, like the fan base, very optimistic about this upcoming season, and the guys at the golf tournament had mentioned it several times that they are expecting to be in the mix this year, playing meaningful games in April. It would seem that sentiment, while we're all embracing it, is not embraced across the board from all of hockey fandom. And I say this because the Vegas line for the Canadiens on point total for the season is sitting around 76 points. And that ain't good. It's not very good at all. That said, however, I am curious, you guys, what you think, given the changes that they've done and given the now healthy Kirby Dach and the inclusion of Patrick Laine and the back six of whoever it's going to be and the no three goalie system and all the other changes that occurred. Is 76 points, if you were a betting man, which maybe some of you are, would you take the over, the under, or do you think 76 is approximately what they're probably going to wind up at? Start with you, Gregory.
I believe you think I'm not opinionated enough usually, so I'm gonna go very opinionated now. I think I'm gonna give you a prediction of 84.
Yeah,
84 points.
84 points.
84
wow,
points.
okay.
I think
we're
gonna be in the mix. We're gonna be better than the best year so far out of that rebuild. We're gonna take a step forward, but we're not gonna be there yet to truly compete for the playoffs in games 80, 81, 82, like we did maybe a few years ago.
Okay, a bubble team, but definitely closer to playoffs.
Yeah.
And much better than a 76-point team, which is probably bottom 5.
Playing significant, important games after the trade deadline still, people believing in our chances until the very end. I
like opinionated, Greg. I like him a lot. All right, we'll go the other way because I don't want to make him upset. I'm sorry, Dave. Vito, tell me.
Well, okay, so I think they're completely wrong. 76 points is exactly what Montreal got last year, and they were missing Kirby Dach, and they had certain key injuries and whatnot. So that does not make any sense whatsoever.
It probably has something to do with who they're playing against. Also, like other teams made. I'm just kind of devil's advocate that other teams changed as well. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, but there's a lot of those teams that are in the Atlantic, let's say, that are probably going to come down now because they've been up for so long that it's time that there's some change there, and they got to go through their own rebuilds and whatnot. And it's easy to think of the Boston Bruins when it comes to that, especially because you keep questioning and we keep wondering how the heck do they still remain so competitive. But they don't even have their number one goalie signed right now. It doesn't mean it's not going to get done. But they don't have that. There's some question marks on goaltending and whatnot, and so with Montreal having the roster that they have, with Patrick Laney being there, and yes, while there's still a lot of question marks on this roster, you have players that are now a little more mature, have a little bit more experience, and whatnot. That it's hard to think that they're going to finish at the exact same spot that they did last year. I feel like Vegas just took those odds and said, you know what? We're just going to put them that way because it's the safest bet we could make. If they do better, great. If they don't, then we were right? And so, if anything, you should be a betting man and follow Greg maybe and say no, they're going to take the over on 76 points, barring any catastrophic injury, of course. But this time they've got their two centers to go. They've got the ammunition on the wings. They've got defense that can play. It's all going to come down to whether they can stay healthy or not. Now, Greg put a prediction of 84 points. I'm going to say they're going to be more like an 87 to 88 point team. Like Washington Capitals last year hit 91 points and their team was garbage. Okay? They were garbage. But they still got in. So kudos to you. They basically beat Detroit in the standings. Montreal didn't help that. But just goes to show a lot can happen. It's going to be how they're going to start the season and accumulate those points right off the cuff. If they can get those points in bank right away, then you're going to see. I do think they're going to taper off closer to the end of the season, and it's going to become a little closer in the standings. But I'm going to say that around that 88-point mark is where I think they're going to end up.
88 points for Vito. Definitely taking the over as well. Dave, bring us back to earth.
Man, I don't know. It's obviously, I think they're going to be an improved team. 76. I mean, I think, Matt, you nailed it when you said the teams around them did better. Like New Jersey had a really terrible season last year. They'll obviously be better. Philly, I think, might improve a little bit depending. You never know. Ottawa got a goaltender. You never know what they always seem to surprise sometimes. But at the end of the day, I think the Canadiens are going to do better than 76 points. I mean, 87 was around my number 2. That's kind of like what Philly did last year. Very close to Detroit was in the mix. They kind of tapered off at the end as well. And just ran out of steam. I mean, they actually had more wins than Washington, but they ended up not making the playoffs due to the road. But anyways,
it's true.
I honestly think that they're going to be a better team. I would say. I mean, I don't want to be boring, so give me 91. Give me 91.
91. Okay, so 91.
Dave.
91 was the number for the last wild card spot. So you're saying that they might actually be that team that either makes it in with 91 points, or they're that team that hit 91 points, and you're going to have the pro tankers freak out. That would be mediocrity.
We're a mediocre team. Man, the tanking's done.
I can't see them tanking again. I mean,
no, I don't think. I think they have too much. I mean, look, it could go one or two ways this season, but I honestly think I'm optimistic about it. I really do think that they're going to improve over last year. If not, I think there's going to be a big problem. I think there's going to be a lot of question marks brought in if they do worse. Obviously, this is all barring their injury history, right? Because they are cursed. Okay, so
some question for you, since you just brought that up, for all of you, if Dach stays healthy, okay, and continues where he left off just before he got hurt, where everybody was talking, where there's so many people talking about, hey, he might take over as the 1C and all that, knowing that Suzuki still had 77 points and 30 plus goals, do you think Dach will post more than 70 points this season?
Okay, before we get to that, can I give my take?
No.
Not allowed as the host. No, I can't say nothing. Okay, quick. I don't have the exact number, but my prediction is they finish 1 point out of the playoffs. Whatever the playoff banner is, whatever that's going to be, they'll be 1 point underneath that. If it's 95, they'll be 94. If it's 91, they'll be 90.
That's where I'm putting it. In 2019 too, right until the end with Columbus. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I think what's going to happen to them. Personally, I think whoever is responsible in Vegas for the odds is making a massive mistake. And if you have a little bit of money and you don't mind parting with it, I think it would be a catastrophic mistake.
It's not
to not
definitely
take
a
the over.
mistake. Like between
It's a
22
mistake.
and 29 in
It's
the
a mistake.
NHL, I don't think they care that much. That's the problem. I don't think
Well,
Vegas
listen,
deep dives
I don't
too
know.
much.
I
They
don't
put a
know
line.
how they did this. You can't look at this team and, like Vito's saying, be the exact same. It's just I can't. Barring the injuries, and if that's what they're banking on, well, then they're a bunch of whatever. But knock wood, everybody stays healthy.
What?
Maybe they're playing the odds there.
It might be smart to bank on injuries, to be honest.
It could be. It could be. It could be. I will live with the optimistic approach, and I will say they will definitely eclipse the 76-point mark this season. Now, to go back to you before my last question, what is Kirby Dach going to finish with? You say? Is that the question?
Do you think he's going to be? Do you think he's going to take over the 1C at some point this season, or post 70 points?
Kirby Dach is not taking over the 1C this season. Like, no.
Okay.
And what does he finish with?
70 points at least.
No, I don't think he posts 70 points. No,
I do not think so either.
No. I think if Kirby Dach gets 55 points, that was a very, very good season.
I agree.
I'm not saying Kirby Dach would get 70. I'm actually took this from a prediction that some people made on Twitter.
I think people saw a small sample size of Kirby Dach, got really very, 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 very overly excited, and then he had the luxury of disappearing for a year and not seeing him on a day in and day basis when he's a little bit hurt or when he's injured, and people just prorate him to incredible heights. And I just think that you got to beware a little bit with Kirby Dach.
And Suzuki just got his first 70-point season, and I think still Dach is incredibly skilled, but he's not just there yet, and he's not the same exact type of player of Suzuki. You just sometimes he just feels like you don't really see him, and he still ends up with two points on the night. I just don't think Dach is there yet. He might be in a few years, but I think it's a bit too rich to predict 70 points right now.
It could be as early as next year. I just think a first season back after missing a whole season, I can't put 70 points on him. I can't, even playing with Laine and Newhook. I can't do it.
For the record, we'll all owe Vito a very, very nice meal if he ends up hitting 70.
He didn't even say 70. He's sitting there telling me, it's not my good. I don't feel this way. Do you feel this way? Is that how you feel?
No, I don't.
He must have felt a little bit away.
I don't think 70. I'm thinking that if he stays healthy, mid 60s, like 63, 64, 65, around there is where he'd finish.
That's a big season. That would be very good for him. I think
he's got the skill set to do it, and I think that with him, the expectation is while he does have a pretty solid two-way game, not a la Suzuki, they're going to basically. He won't have to be as defensively responsible as Suzuki.
And very quickly, it also depends a lot on how Laine and Newhook play.
There's a lot of variables there, so I'm saying if. That one of the reasons why I'm going to 65 points and all that, or in and around that, is because I'm also hopeful and expecting a monster year from his potential line mate in Laine. So they're going to feed off of each other, and there's going to be production there.
No, understood. And as always, Vito, thank you for your question and contribution. I appreciate that. One last little thing before we let you guys go, just because it's I don't know, I just want to know your level of disgust of hearing the news that Max Pacioretty is very likely to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, former Habs captain. Where does it register at all? Are you like, oh my God, I can't stomach it, or is it somewhere in the middle? Just let me know, quick. Start with you, Dave.
I don't care. Max Pacioretty is at the end of his career. He's also so far removed from being the Habs captain. It's a completely different team, a completely different culture, whatever you want to call it. It's nowhere near even on my radar in terms of importance and betrayal to the Canadiens or whatnot, or heartbreak. Nothing at all. I mean, it's not at all the same as the Thomas Plekanec's going there. It wouldn't have been the same had Mike Komisarek signed there, right? As when Mike Komisarek signed there, or if Josh Georges had been dealt there before you vetoed that trade. I don't think it registers.
Okay.
We're good.
Fair enough. Greg?
I do not care. I just hope he keeps. I just hope he keeps.
Greg, I love it.
I just hope he keeps the 67 as a number and calls it a day. I do not care.
That's great.
I like it.
He's played with two other teams since Montreal. Like, who cares at this point? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, he's former captain, but so
what?
With
like 3 different teams.
Well, Vegas,
Carolina,
Washington.
Oh, Carolina too. Wow. Okay, that's true. Yeah, but
He barely played in Carolina.
He got hurt 4 minutes in. So it's like, okay, yeah, he's a former captain. He played for the Montreal Canadiens. We basically got almost his prime years, anyways. It's like, go have a last push, get a bit more money for your family and your 5 kids that you have now. Just go do what you got to do. Prove that you can still play hockey. And if it happens to be at the Leafs, it happens to be at the Leafs. I mean, there's only 2 other players in the Montreal Canadiens history or 2 other former captains to have ever gone to the Maple Leafs: Kirk Muller or Hainsworth, and now Pacioretty. It happens once every 50 years. Enjoy.
I mean, the math there somehow doesn't work out with the Kurt Muller thing, but yeah, fast. I mean, does it register? No. Am I losing sleep over it? No. But I will admit, I'm not thrilled about it. There's just something about it. It doesn't sit right with me. It's not the same as Max Domi going there. It's not the same as Galchenyuk going there. I don't think it's the same as even Plekanec, which was gross and it was directly from the Habs, and I hated probably more than this. But there's just something about it. But do I really care? No, not as much as many people seemingly care.
It'll be disgusting. We'll have a sour taste in our mouths is when Montreal's facing the Leafs, and if he's the one that scores a game winner,
No. Oh,
that's
mark
so
this
gross.
down. It's a fact. It's
The
a guarantee.
It's
a guarantee when they play that opening game against the Leafs, and he's on there, and it's a 2-2 tie end of the third period. It will be Max Pacioretty who either dishes to Matthews or Matthews to Pacioretty that's going to win the game.
That's
you know it.
Disgusting.
You know it. Anyways,
I hate it.
Yeah, it's gross. Anyways, thanks very much, everybody, for listening and taking the time to listen to us talk about all kinds of fun things as we're ramping up to the start of the 2024-2025 season. Very excited stuff. We're hoping to be back on a little bit more of a static schedule and less time in between, so please keep an eye out for that. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. You know the drill. This is YouTube. And as always, for Vito, Greg, and Dave, I'm Matt, and this was Get Pucked.